from something. Right? Let's just get started. So, hey, what is up, guys? It's your boy Tweh here, and this will be very first and foremost podcast. Yes, very first time that I'm going to do this. Will be uncut, so if you hear a lot of this, that, and the thirds, me just stumbling upon my words, yes, because I will not be cutting it. And joining me today will be Karu, Gaia. I don't even know how to address you, actually. I want to try using the full name, but let's begin with some introductions. Starting off with Karu, I want to know, what are your humble beginnings like? How old are you? What do you do for a living? What do you drink right now? What games did you play mostly coming up to Kingsray? Because that is where my biggest curiosity is. So take it away, my friend.
So I actually originated through a few other games beforehand. I originally actually played a lot of Minecraft before I shifted out of that community towards early 2019. From there, I started expanding into a few other more mobile games is where I primarily went to. Where I tried Summoner's War for a while. I tried a game called Monster Super League. That one had me for a bit. Before I eventually stumbled into KR when I got a new phone. And from there, I played it basically daily since, and this is getting close to my third year.
Third year at Kingsray. Wow, that is big ups. So,
and currently I'm drinking orange juice because orange juice is delicious. You can't change my mind.
Orange juice is delicious, and you cannot be telling whether this is vodka or water, but best believe it is as clean as a crystal. Drinking streams are for other times, and I'm not sure if it's bannable, but either way, coming into Kingsray, man, 3 years in the making. So, what main? Do you have a main?
Yes, I think you know exactly who my main is.
But the people don't. Tell them.
My main is Theo. I have been a Theo main since about day somewhere between 10 and 15, and I haven't stopped since. Currently, he is in full TM gear, 25-star, min-maxed UTs to literally the maximum.
Nice.
His role is the best I have, besides Rapine, who stumbled into it on pure bullshit.
Fair enough. People in the chat like, oh, Theo main. Okay, everybody leaves. I actually do commend you, Karu, for sticking to your main, bro, because I know you've tried to make him work spectacularly, and I think you still do a very good job while doing so. And
yep, I can do Shack 9. I have used him for Ascalon 8. He helps me clear the waves quick before Grem finishes off the boss.
See.
And I have a 100% win rate in it.
So then
he's still one of my DPSs for Gal 7. Sorry for interrupting.
So then the question really is, like, being a Theo main, and I think this is really interesting too, because a lot of people are like, oh, but if you're not playing meta, then you cannot do Jack. Is that true, being a Theo main?
Yes, but also no, because Theo is one of the best generalists in the game, meaning he had the tools originally to do a majority of content before the new content came out. So, while I can 100% agree that if you're not playing meta, you're going to struggle against certain things when you're using, say, Ezekiel, because Ezekiel only has a few contents that he can truly excel in. But because of the fact that Theo already was built for that, he's been able to carry himself well, even if he's not the best or even necessarily that good in it. A good example is Siegfried. Before I figured out any of Sieg's mechanics, I was able to have him carry me through stage 2 back when there was only 6 stages.
So those were the good days. So he's capable of doing a lot. And
he is capable of doing a lot.
Yeah. So, if you would address the people that are interested in Theo, what would be his biggest selling point to you?
I primarily really like S3, if I'm being honest. It's not that good. It's really his worst move in his kit. But also, especially when it's the killing blow, S3 is extremely funny to use. Primarily in PvP.
Oh, it's like I'm not sure if you play League of Legends, but to me it's that Jarvan ultimate skill, right? Where you're jumping on people, and if you kill him on that blow, that's godlike. So okay, so
my favorite moment with it was I finished killing someone at the perfect time where I used S3 straight after. So he went from the back line on the far right to jumping to the Cecilia on the other side of the screen.
Oh, that stuff is funny as hell. I like seeing some characters just teleport. Like Gladia is one of them that makes insane moves for no reason. Scarlet is one of them, and apparently Theo is one of them too. That's crazy. But what we didn't catch yet, how old are you and what do you do for a living, bro?
Currently I am 17. I am still a student, currently a high school senior in America. America. And I currently work in the movie theater to get myself a little bit of cash.
Hey, so into movies or just working there for cash? Like,
could be working there for cash.
So
I'm
yes,
more of a gamer than movie person.
So, ladies and gentlemen, my guy's underage. I asked, it's gonna be okay. There's no funny business here. But either way, man, we got to talk a little bit throughout the games. You being on the NA server, me being on the EU server, and we just exchanged a lot of ideas on how to improve this game, which is also the reason why we even thought about this podcast for sure. So I think overall we are gonna address like a lot of things, but before that we're gonna introduce me, myself, and I for the people who don't know. So my name is Tweh, aka Twebby, aka Richard. For those people who want to really address me, I'm 31 years old. I look about 16 as well, especially if I chop my beard off. And I just finished my physiotherapy bachelor's degree. Have been playing games for like as long as I can remember. Grew up from MMOs like RuneScape, MapleStory, went into, never actually touched World of Warcraft, touched upon Ion, Blade and Soul, and where basically my streaming started was Continent of the Ninth, which is a game that originated even before Black Desert hit, so it has about the similar combat. And I would call those games still my home, like action MMOs, because that's what I'm still greatest at. I'm just good at pressing buttons for some reason. And then later transferred on to Blade and Soul, because unfortunately the developers there really killed the game, which also gave me a lot of insight because I was a content creator there as well, to how a company can really make a game work or break at the same time. Same happened to Blade and Soul. Went over there, did some content creation, and I'm not even sure if there's still some YouTube videos on there, but there are some left. And same thing happened to that game basically, where I think the cash up overtook the game and really lost a big player base due to several reasons, being absolute pay to win, which was some of the topics that we will be talking about today as well. Then once that game pretty much died out to me, put down some cash in there and felt like such a huge spending for what you could actually get, the RNG factors being absolutely horrendous. I ended up actually going back to school, starting my bachelor's degree, and during that time I found myself like, yo, I want to be playing some games but casually. And here we are. I messed up. Either way, not straight after, but after I started playing for about a year, I started making some content, and people gradually started liking the things that I do, and I got myself into the CR community, or the I was about to say challenge raid community, into the seed raider community. Got some more people in there, and now we're trying to dissect what King's Raid is and what made it good and what could make it better. I think that is the best way to keep talking about it. So I'm liking to ask you, Karu, what do you think, in your opinion, makes King's Raid great, or made it great when it started out? Like,
it was the very diverse collection of characters that you could get, and you didn't have to rely on gacha.
yes.
Like, that was the major selling point that at least pulled me in there. There wasn't that much gacha you had to worry about. Even nowadays, even back then, where UWs and UTs were horrendous to get,
Yep.
they weren't the end of the world.
Yep.
You still were able to get yourself a 5-star eventually, and you were still able to play whatever character you decided you wanted to play. Also, back then, especially if you weren't trying to progress super quick, it didn't really matter who you picked, you would progress at a pretty consistent rate.
True.
From there, it also started expanding into when doing co-op raids were still fairly known and used.
Dragons!
Yep. I wasn't there when apparently you had to basically RNG your way into getting dragons, but I was there once dragons got fairly consistent to use. Like, to give a little more insight, I joined basically the same day that Chapter 9 released.
Oh, I see. So I have a feeling I even joined earlier than you did.
Yep.
Interesting.
So that means that I basically joined and I got bombarded with a lot of free stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I genuinely like. The moment there's new content released, they always bring out new events that will, I wouldn't necessarily call it, give the newer players a chance to then come to a certain level that other people have, but getting yourself a 5-star unique weapon console right off the bat because it's anniversary, that stuff to me is crazy. Because how long did it take you to get your first 5-star unique weapon?
I think it was somewhere around day 180.
Okay, so about like
I was a little
half a year.
Foolish and invested in like 3 different heroes to start with.
Yeah, so it's quite similar to mine. It took my chase probably, also like half a year to get to that 5-star. Interesting. So
it's fun. Sorry.
Outside of like the diverse,
I'm gonna shut up.
But outside of the diverse line of characters that you could pick back in the day, and that you like I would like to address it. You could just pick anything and you could make it work if you just think about it, right? If you could like voice it like that.
It is indeed like that.
Beside that point, what made the game so good?
Well, you also need to consider the games I had just come out of. I had been playing Summoner's War and Monster Super League directly beforehand, which those games had similar aspects to KR. They had 3 basic skills, 2 or 3, but here's the big difference. They were basically turn-based. You attacked and then they attacked you. KR was basically everything's happening at once. You use skills while in the middle of fighting still. There's no turn-based, it's just fight. That to me was really fun, and that hooked me in pretty quick.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump up on that just a little bit. Like, I still remember the day that I just tried to make sense of this game. A lot of stuff was popping up on my screen, and I could not make any sense of it. So to make sense of the whole game, I started doing 1 character manual, 2 characters a manual. After that, I really got a real sense of how the characters work, then read up on some things, and honestly, like, I think the interactiveness and the way that the combat is presented into this game makes it a success in itself, because there aren't many games who do the exact same thing, or I'm not quite sure, but I do agree upon that the combat itself is quite interactive to a degree where it's still good enough for a mobile phone game, but pretty much at a peak state, because like you said, it's way different from turn-based games, way different.
And there's a reason that turn-based is the one that's more used. It's used for Summoner's War, Monster Super League, Epic 7.
Yep.
The reason it's used over this version is that this version is so much more resource intensive.
True.
While in turn-based, you're basically getting one hero doing all these splashy skills at once. In this one, especially once more and more mobs start spawning in, you could have up to 18 to 20 different things having to use individual attacks and animations at once. That starts taking a toll on the phone.
Yep. And that is also one of its downsides, because the bigger the game becomes, the more resources it needs to really just render, even at the end of the day. So
Chapter 9 early stages.
Oh man, those were just, remember all those just slimes just popping up and then blowing up your phone, crashing and such. And I think overall they did a pretty good job to make a mobile phone game that obviously has its stability issues over the course of time. I'm not quite sure how the mobile presentation is nowadays, and I would like to look at the chat if they have any mobile experience with this game, but having them to make a PC client within the near future, I'm very much interested in how that's going to play out, because that could potentially really address that stability issue. Then again, I know, for instance, my little brother, he's a Summoners War player, and he started the game purely because he was traveling a whole lot. So it then puts down part of the audience on a back leg, like, is this really what I want to play at the end of the day? But it also opens up something that I would like to address as well, and that is options. And with that I mean, look at Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is limited by its mobile phone players, because that is probably the most player base that they have, which means that if you have a mobile phone, you have a storage which you could use basically. And going over that means you cannot add any more content unless you reach the DLC status. So what do you think is going to be added within the PC client? What could it really add to Kingsraid, Karu?
Primarily stability. Like, what the big issue people have just in any situation is the fact that the game itself is unstable at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you try playing it, there's a multitude of areas where you'll lag heavily. There's a multitude of areas where you're going to have a risk of crashing. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you this from experience, the longer you play the game, even something as simple as smashing gears together, the more the game starts to show how it isn't perfectly optimized, mm-hmm. and it will start crippling itself. Like, I will commonly smash 50 pieces of gear together and then relog because of the fact that I have to. The game's gotten to a point where even clicking the buttons, the 3 buttons to crush another thing together, takes a solid 10 seconds, when normally it can take 1.
True. Yep, I have the exact same thing, and I do think it can add another dimension to the game as well, because I'm gonna keep mentioning Genshin Impact as an example, because a lot of people really liked the early start of the game because it was innovative, it was very resourceful, you had a really good sense of exploration, which made the game absolutely crazy. But now they're coming up at a point where they are going to get just addressed by the fact that they kind of add any more complexity to the game, because 1, it's game mechanics, and 2 is the amount of resources that is needed for a mobile phone player. And if you are dragged down by the latter, then you cannot add any more content or any more complexity to a game. And I do think that within a PC client, hopefully we will be able to get some things more added to our gameplay and maybe our overall look on the game. So thinking about that, is there anything that a PC client could also add?
To that, I still want to say not entirely at the start. And that's a big phrase I want to remember here, at the start. A PC client cannot do what a mobile client can't already do because of the mobile's limitations. Mm-hmm. And that biggest limitation is going to be the optimization of storage and the optimization of RAM. Mm-hmm. But that's going to be where the PC client is going to shine, because it's being used because it's going to be used as a way to start optimizing storage and optimizing the RAM. Mm-hmm. Those same practices will be able to carry to mobile, allowing for the mobile to be able to expand into new content.
True.
It'll allow for more.
Yep. So it basically allows for a bigger platform, more complexity, and more stability, if you would round that one up, in my opinion. Then
it allows them to down-tune some of the over-complexity of old content so they can up-tune new content.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Alright, so one of the things that I'd like to address what made Kingsraid a success at the start, and probably still now, because at the end of the day, we still have a player base. We still have people that are very eager to look forward to Kingsraid 2, and some people that already said, like, yo, okay, I'm gonna quit this game now, but once KR2 hits, I'm gonna play again. Like, I think part of it is involvement. Like if you put down money, great. Like that is the point where you get involved and you want to see your money's worth. And that's why a lot of people stick around nowadays in their gacha games. Probably for better or for worse. I'm not quite sure about that. But to me, I think the way that they put down the characters, everyone got their unique story, but almost all of the characters have an involvement within the story, which then progresses further along the patches. And I do think that involvement makes it so very likable to a lot of people that even play casually. But outside of the fact of that, I want to address this one thing, and I do agree with that. And that's another dimension that maybe a PC client could add. I think we're having a downgrade where the biggest game developers are now looking forward to addressing the widest community, and that is people that are playing on their phones. But as a person said, Elon Musk, that said we actually downgraded from a keyboard where we use 10 fingers and maybe your nose if you want to press something, but to 2 thumbs, which basically can never be faster than 10 fingers. So if you could add that to a PC client, you can then add more complexity, which is probably harder to play on a mobile phone. It's not unplayable, but less playable, I guess. So we could add more complexity to games itself. And I think in general, mobile phone games, however they will target the broader audience, it will still not address the audience that really wants to have challenges. And maybe a PC client could give that as well. I don't think they will change much upon that, but hopefully they would. Then for other successes, like what is another key factor at King's Raid that you would sell to people, like people that you don't know and they're asking like, what game are you playing, and how would you sell it to them?
The best way to just sell this game. Well, I'm gonna steer away from using community as a topic for now, because you can see the giant green blurb for that. That's a huge rant for an entire different day.
Yep, true.
Consistent updates would also be something I would link into there. So, updates are something I'm gonna steer away.
Okay.
Accessibility. That's where I'm gonna choose to go with this.
Okay. Just elaborate on that for a second, because I'm curious what you think.
This is a mixture of 2 different factors: free to play versus pay to win, and how easy it is to understand the game.
True.
Starting with the free to play versus pay to win, since that's going to be the one that I think is a little more confusing to people, especially if you're a veteran.
Yep.
Look at it like this. As Tweh said earlier, we got a 5-star unique gear ticket for Castle, Tweh, or Klaus earlier this year. Compare that to 2008, like when I joined, and how it took us literally half a year to get just one of those.
Yep.
You can't tell me that the speed of progression for newer players isn't a much higher curve than it is for older players. Like, it's a curve that has to go up, but you have to figure out what the slope of the 2 things are, so you know how long it takes them to meet at the middle.
Mm-hmm.
That's what KR, I think, does a lot better than people realize.
Yep.
It's not that hard to meet at the middle with a lot of the huge whales.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're never going to be actually at the middle with them, but just like with a lot of numbers, there can be several hundred decimal points further down, but you're still on top of them.
True.
I don't need to have 20 A220s in order to have the same results as the guy with 5 A220s.
True. I think overall, like what would be the broad necessity to really get to the end game?
The end game is being able to do high stages of TM, high stages of Shack, high enough PvP where you can call yourself like high masters, low challenger.
Mm-hmm.
Because I say it like that because if you want to focus on doing PvP but you don't want to go meta, just get to high masters and then you've already done more than you probably needed to.
Yep. And this is basically how I got into the game as well. Like, I never really bothered with the PvP because there were so many things just popping up on my screen and I couldn't keep up. But to myself, I looked at the rewards and I said to myself, hey, it would be dumb for me to not do this. So I went it up in PvP. And that's how Jopa is addressing. Like, artifacts are a huge difference between new and the old players, true. But imagine that there are many other games, and this is what's happening with a lot of games. So you basically have a ceiling at the end of let's say patch 1, and there's always this mid part of people that are free to play, and that's their ceiling to get. But the moment the patch hits, there will be a shift in the absolute ceiling and then the free to play ceiling, and in that way there's still a linear increase, sometimes not, depending on the pay to win factor, to really get yourself maxed out. And this is happening with everything. But then there's obviously, to get to the free to play ceiling, it takes up a little bit longer for free to play, especially new players, to get there. But the overall increase in progression is still pretty satisfying overall, in my opinion, because I really have to address this one. I had this one person, whenever I popped up that we're gonna do this podcast, he said to us like, oh my god, the game is trash, the acquisition of unique weapons, unique treasures is absolute horrendous, like the RNG factor on Jin is ass, which, well, it could be good, it could be bad. We see things break way too much. Like, I wish I could see statistics on how many unique weapons and unique treasures I broke along the line, to just show the people like, this is the actual amount of values that we have over here. And what people tend to forget, and especially the newer players, and I'm not quite sure whether that is at fault for Vespa not taking that into account, is that there is a progression, pretty steep one at the beginning, and then overall later it becomes a little bit stale. I'm not sure, do you agree with that, Karu, or?
No, I do not agree with that. Because I believe it matters what you choose to do. If you're going for meta, I agree it gets stale pretty quick because of the fact that you're giving yourself a cap a lot quicker. But like, especially for me who went Theo, my cap was a lot lower to start with, allowing me to have more progression the higher I went.
True. So what would you recommend for the people then?
I recommend noticing the meta, trying to dissect the aspects you need for the meta, and then deciding whether you want to hit that ceiling as fast as possible, or if you're willing to take some time but play the game how you feel would be a better way to play it. Like, again, that's an issue with modern gameplay. The meta is what's jurisdicting it now. Which means that most new players are gravitating to like some of the newest 10 characters to release, like Gremory, Lucikiel, those types of guys. Meanwhile, players like me, who started off with Theo, progress much slower, but we're progressing. And because we're also still progressing, we're keeping up over time. Because again, it's like, do you want to hit a high ceiling quick, or do you want to be able to get to that ceiling just with time?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I wonder, like, what would be the very first real ceiling that people would hit? One on the side of being meta, and the other one to be off meta. I wonder, what do you think?
First, getting your 5-star unique weapon is when you first hit your basic wall. Because you're going to get your unique weapon first. There's no doubt about that. You need to space out your treasures more. You don't have enough time to focus on a single unique weapon as quickly. A unique treasure as quickly. And you're not getting TM until you start getting a high tier weapon. So weapons are also kind of locked behind that. Getting your first high tier unique weapon and then 5-starring it, you're realizing, well dang, this can't go higher. Because of that, your unique weapons have to go somewhere else, and you don't know where to put them originally, meaning that you're going to have to start testing. You're going to have to decide what you're either going to ask in global chat or guild chat or something like that, learn what you think you need to go for, and go for it. but building that up to give the results that you're probably going to initially look for is going to take even more time. Meaning that DPS, which is who you built that 5-star to first, or at least normally, is going to be at like a rough damage height for a while until you finally start stepping a little bit more further, doing a higher stage of TM, starting to do higher stages of soul weapon, advancing your soul weapon to stage 0 once you get your first one, stage 2, and then eventually stage 2, and then you start to see the progression speed up a little more, because then that character is going to start hitting a stride, especially once you hit A1 and A2 compared to their predecessors, and you're going to start speeding again, because then your progression is going to speed up a lot, and then it'll take you a little more before you hit the next plateau.
Yeah, and I think I want to elaborate on
what you want to do more.
Yeah, and I think I want to elaborate on that a little bit more, because I think that a lot of people are hitting ceilings that are pretty obvious, but people don't necessarily understand them when they are newer players. So it basically means that if I go full 5-star on the very first character, then obviously he can do damage. But let's look at trials, for instance. Like, if you don't have a good or well invested claws, for instance, and don't have him geared properly, you get killed no matter how much damage that you do. So it seems like a very obvious wall that you will end up hitting because you're playing a meta and you're progressing super fast, and that wall becomes only bigger over time, right? If you like go super steep on the progression, like the downfall becomes equally as hard. But now having a 5-star weapon doesn't mean much. The soul weapon TM and artifacts are now needed. But here's the issue with that, Tamahome. You're comparing that to veteran players. And while I do think you are right, because artifacts make the world in this game, especially when it comes to PvP. But when you are a newer player, thinking about clearing the content itself, then you shouldn't even worry about these things. Like, I got happy as hell when I got my first Book of the Mad, absolutely having 2 5-stars already, and I'm not using them for anything right now. And they used to be the absolute most godlike thing ever. But the things change over time, which means that you don't have to get your Book of the Mad 5-stars anymore. You can simply get yourself a nil Ornament of the Deep and do equal amount of damage in comparison. So there are changes that are currently being made that will affect not only veteran players but new players as well. The fact that there's also a new artifact coming out, or that's currently around, with the Battle Pass, which is obviously part pay to win, but you can get the most obvious one at that, and that will address part of the people that don't get those artifacts, I guess. But I see a big wall of text in wait. But as Kaneki is saying, you get so much as a newer player, it is insane, which then means that it is way easier to break through those walls again. Like, if I look at my speedruns and the absolute fact that I can kill myself Trial of Earth 4 at the start of the game, Trial of Flow 4 at the start of the game within 10 hours, and that is not even gearing my tanks, my supports, no nothing, that will already set you at a bar where you can get your first soul weapon if you just increase your characters for a week further. Get your first soul weapons, increase those, get your first few characters doing Eclipse, and you will progress 20 times faster. Because I think, remember Karu, the moment that soul weapon came up,
oh, I remember,
like they did a poor job at rolling that one out.
They did.
But remember the state that your account was in. I think I can reach that state within 2 weeks.
2 weeks? Give yourself like a week and a half.
Week and a half. See? And that's where it is. And obviously that is with the knowledge that we got, right?
Yeah.
And would it be free to play?
Yes, basically.
Because pay to win would be the same day. Anyway. And I think that is
all
where
you have to do is go dibbly-dabbly down into the little $84 packages, buy yourself 2 or 3 of the unique weapon and unique treasure ones, A220 25 star in 2 days.
Yep. And that in itself is crazy. And I do think we need to elaborate on the pay to win part. So I'm actually not even sure as where to start with pay to win, outside of the fact that we need to address what is pay to win. And I think there are two types of pay to win in games, because I'd like to address this to the Blade and Soul reason of things, where there were certain items, gems, hidden behind a pay to win wall. There was no way in this game where you could get them by just playing it themselves. And does King's Raid have an equal thing that is, I'm not sure if you play Blade and Soul ever, but is there an equal thing that is just as impactful as those crystals are, do you think?
No.
No.
The only thing that is remotely, completely lost behind money right now is technically Lulu tickets, if you want to think about it like that, but we've gotten a few of those in the past from freebies. But the current 2 Battle Pass artifacts. Those are the only 2 things I can think of completely locked behind money.
I can name a third, and that is line pets, but they don't even release them anymore.
We don't talk about line pets.
So here's the thing, and this is what I never get about people, is they don't want to spend money on a game, but they buy smokes. I'd rather die with having a character on a 5-star than lung cancer. I'm not joking right here. I'm not joking, right? I've seen enough in my days to I see enough patients with a lot of health efforts that really try to better themselves after they committed a crime, and by all means I will buy myself a $25 pack every single month if needed to get myself the unique weapons, unique treasures, battle pass artifacts, or whatever, instead of buying myself a pack of smokes. Now, what I do think about pay to win in a general sense is if there are items locked behind a pay to win wall, then we are literally demanding, or like Vespa's literally demanding the people to put down their money. And I do think the battle pass sort of resembles that, because, well, that's a thing. And just to elaborate, let me see the chat for a second. What I will say is out of context, but I wish they add A3. It will be different type of soul stones, something they prevent the whales to get A3 within 20 minutes. Something you can only grind with time.
The issue with having an A3 that is perfectly time gated is the fact that it's time gated.
Yep.
Would you want to spend an extra 2 months getting yourself an A3 you could get in 5 minutes by just proper planning?
Yep.
Or would you also just rather get that but then have whales be super far ahead? I'd rather let the whales be far ahead for now, because again, you have to think of the plateau versus the hill.
Yep.
The whales will hit that plateau 5 minutes, and then you're just going to be like, okay, I'm here now, what do I do?
Yep.
We're going to grow, we're going to see what actually is worth investing in, and then one or two of those, at least one of those 2 of those things that they invested into, like maybe it takes 8 soul stones for A3, they're spent like a whole bunch of money on A3, but then that A3, it makes that character not even meta anymore.
Yep.
Gremlin's soul weapon could become meta with an A3, and Veronica's soul weapon could completely drop out because of A3.
Yep. But I do think this comes with a kind of a dark side, because it makes the game very linear instead of diverse, because the whales will then make the meta straight away and everybody will follow suit, because this game, it requires time. But the fact that it is stamina based, the fact that it is limited amount of tickets that you can use for certain types of content will just put people in a straight line, like you have to do this, if you don't do this you're doing something bad. And I think that is a little bit bad in to some degree, because most games do well at the start because you get this rush of dopamine, because you get thrown into a completely different world. And Karu, do you read manga?
Yes, I do.
How many isekai shits are there?
I'm not counting.
Exactly. And the reason why it does that well is because you get it thrown into a new world, you have to adjust, you have to adapt, you have to explore, and that is what keeps people really occupied within newer games. And that's why you see a lot of streamers go from X game to Y game to Z game to really just add to that part. Because that is where most of the content is coming from in newer games as well, is just the exploration part. And that's why Genshin Impact was tremendous at the start, because it literally threw you into this humongous world, and every corner had a box basically. And I'm gonna ask a hard question. Is it possible for a game that existed over 4 years to do that once again?
Yes.
And how?
All they have to do is create something different. Right now, we're getting content that is very similar.
Sounds simple. Create something different.
But like, here's a good example. When Shaq released, while people didn't take it the best because it was a pure auto content,
True.
it is still a different mode.
Yep.
It's unique, you have to figure it out, and then over time we started developing more.
Yep.
And then we got to Big Shack. That's very different.
Yep.
And then you saw what happened when people discovered that, and how much people wanted to get to Big Shack because they wanted to play this really cool looking content.
Yep.
And then they did Arkham.
Yeah.
And then I hope they realized that's why doing the exact same thing, more or less, doesn't fully work.
No.
And the interesting gimmicks were there, but I would have rather them use that gimmick to like add on to an old content, just change that, tweak it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they could have done it to dragons, make it something that you have to try, and then you get something neat out of dragons that you didn't get before.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been better than making entire new content now that you have to try to fix.
True. And I think it also has to do with, like, what could they still add? And I've elaborated on this on stream many times, and that is the amount of mechanics that a game has will limit a game to what it is. Once again, I'm gonna pop Blade and Soul into the equation, where you had basically let's say 10 buttons, and those 10 buttons had an X amount of cooldown, and once you really add to the highest skill cap, right, you will use all your cooldowns at the right time at the right point, and that is where gameplay stops. Right, you can have still a multitude of puzzles depending on the cooldowns to make, but that will automatically limit, the cooldowns will automatically limit your overall gameplay. And the same thing happens with King's Raid. Like, we have stun mechanics, stun bars, mana bars, we got HP bars, and those are 3 contributing factors to what our overall gameplay is. And that skill ceiling, unless they really add a different mechanic, becomes very hard to make for new content. So that is something that we're going to elaborate on to a way different podcast. So if you have any suggestions, put it down into the comments. I'm really curious if you guys have any ideas about new kinds of mechanics that they could add on a mobile phone game. 2.
TMs real quick.
Yep. But either way, with that skill ceiling being there, and just overall accessibility will allow you to make new content. And I do have to give Vespa mad props, because what do you think about the new challenge raid?
I actually think that it has some that does right, and it has some that does wrong.
Okay. Let's hear
What
it.
they did right is they made it very, very diverse for what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
What they did wrong is it's too expansive, but there's only one set goal. Like, you have so much you can do, but it's like a leaf. You circle around or go through whatever vein you want to go to, you still end up at the tip.
Yep.
And in this case, that tip is hell mode, all things equipped, so that you get yourself 2650 points or whatever it was.
Okay. True.
62 500.
Mm-hmm. But that's the fact for multi-mode. What do you think is going to happen in solo?
I think it's going to be extremely similar, except you don't have people to carry you.
True. So then, would it make it harder for a lot of people to hit that cap?
Yes. Because then it's going to start being do you have the artifacts? Do you have the invested UWs and UTs? Do you actually have a strategy? Can you press buttons while also relying on certain characters to do their correct auto?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you plan around the fact that they always start with S1?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, in that sense, did you enjoy the new challenge raid?
Actually, yes. For two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One, while people hit a high ceiling pretty quick, no one truly hit the actual ceiling until a week later.
Yep.
If the whales took over a week for them to actually hit a ceiling, then there's something that went right there.
True.
Even if that something was just making it so that all your buffs got dispelled consistently.
Yeah, and I do think that kind of limits the options that you can get, because in my honest opinion, there's only one character that can really downplay the maximum buffs, and that's Kazu, because he doesn't care about anything that gets dispelled.
Yep.
And he does a ridiculous amount of damage, and I hope for them to release buffs to, let's say, Gladi, Celine, to make their unique weapons and unique treasures undispellable. But that is something that I'd like to address in a different manner. As GMT is saying, they could add special abilities to timing soul weapons together when there are certain heroes together. Like magic teams have a special L, and this is something that we have been thinking about as well, which is also down to your left, and that is an affinity chart, which means if you put certain characters together, then
I'll link you the unfinished chart right now.
Kaneki says you did it to 62k with Kersey, nice, but it took you 4.5. And that is the funny part, Kaneki. Like, I think there are options. I think my Chase would be equally as capable as Kazu would be, but I do think there are several characters that should be in there. And I think at least Gladi should be in here, because I think he deserves a spotlight. And Celine got taken away from, I think, one of her core things that she really did, and that was challenge raid. So while I really do enjoy you having that one, I do think they have to just give something like that. But you had an affinity chart, you said. Let me check.
Yeah, by the way, that thing with Celine, I think it's fine that she got taken from challenge raid because she has Eclipse.
True. So
and when you have this many characters, you need to be able to differentiate where each character is best, so that while characters can do multiple things, they only maybe have one thing that they're truly best at. Also, I gave you like the Excel sheet right above that one.
Yep. Okay, so please elaborate on this for a hot second, because this is the first time that I'm seeing this, so I'm mad curious what you thought of this.
So this is what I have a little thing I had started creating, and I didn't honestly get that far into finishing, which I named the KR Affinity chart. Essentially, every character has an affinity they have with both themselves and with every other character in the game, creating a type of synergy system where if Kazu and Freight are together, it creates a buff both for them and for, in some cases, the entire party. And then there's also negative buffs, like for example, Kazu and Dark Kazu obviously wouldn't have a very good synergy with each other. Meaning it would be harder to do a team with those together.
Wow. Okay.
Like, I'll be straight, the biggest one I had is, if you look a little further down in Light versus Dark, and I'll just let you read it.
Where's that thing?
It's a little bit lower.
You put down a lot of text, my brother. Damn.
I did put a lot of text.
Oh, this is beautiful. I think we need to elaborate on this some more because light versus dark. Hero that deal 20% more damage but take 20% more damage. Cannot give him shield damage. Okay, with this effect. So you're basically giving yourself a penalty, but not just in challenge rate, but in the game itself, right?
Yes.
Oh,
this would be for all content.
Yo, that is beautiful, my guy. And I do think this. Oh, I'm getting excited. Okay, please elaborate on this some more because I think this is crazy.
Like, here's the thing that'll make it a little more interesting for people off the start.
Mm-hmm.
It's light versus dark. This instantly makes Fallen Frey more balanced. That's what I'll say, and if you read a little closer, you'll see why.
Wait, let me check this. Can it be given shields or damage immunity buffs if the buff is from a hero with this effect? Okay, so that really applies to her, right? Or
yep,
is it even...
basically that means that with the multitude of characters who would be with the same effect with her, she couldn't give that buff to her. She couldn't give her shield to them. Meaning that means that there's probably a good half the roster she can't give a shield to.
Yeah.
But that also inherently makes Frey herself better. Because then she also has, as a little light priest, she has a lot of okay affinity or good affinity with a multitude of other characters, resulting in her shield, A, being one you can actually use on them, and B, just getting a little more passive buffs from. For example, Kazu and Frey have PT, FM, FN, and HM, which is Protector, Family, Harmony, and Friends buffs. And if you look on the affinity effects, that means all four of those would be on there. Protector.
So basically, if you combine those characters, they will all have that buff.
It would be for the characters themselves, unless otherwise stated.
Okay.
Like, for example, Protector, it would only be between, in this case, Kazu and Frey.
Interesting. And I think this would add to the... Just thinking about this, right? If you have world boss, you have a pretty standard meta. Like, oh, you have one damage dealer and the rest are buffers, right? And this system could really take away from that, where you gotta put characters together that synergize and not just have like one single character that does the best at world boss. No, there are a lot of options that you can then pick once again. So you can go this route, that route, because right about now, Theo got buff. World boss 2 main. Before that was Cecilia, or before that was Mitra, before that was whatever, right? Now it becomes a team together to make, at least that's how this plays up in my mind.
Yeah, it might not work out exactly depending on how buffs synergize with different characters off the start.
Yeah, but let's just say you put like Jane together with Theo, right? Like having those two characters having a similar synergy that currently Fallen Frey and DLK have might make Theo OP in PvP. Maybe. Like this is obviously just theorizing and something that they could add. But how would you see this play out? Because you're the one that thought of this, right? How do you really see this play out?
Well, there's two things that I kind of thought of off the top of this. One, I know a lot of people who would rather there be an incentive on the story as per the buffs and whatnot that people get. For example, since Kazu's the main character, obviously he should be a higher tier character. But irrelevant character number 3, we're not going to pick someone not to offend anyone, would be lower down on the spectrum because of the fact that they aren't as pertinent to the storyline. They wouldn't necessarily be bad, but they wouldn't be meta.
Yeah, and I think it also takes back from the fact that you will get back into a state of the game where people can pick once again what they like instead of what is meta, because of the synergy.
And some things will be better in other places. For example, if I can direct your attention to Educator, The target of this buff gains 50% more mana recovery and is immune to mana block and reduction effects.
I need that.
If
That
stacks,
one. I need that one.
Like, Educator instantly becomes a very good thing in PvP, in Ascalon, in Galgoria, because that means that they wouldn't be able to be, not Galgoria, sorry, that's a different thing. Well, mainly Ascalon and PvP, because then DLK isn't a huge issue. Ascalon can't really make you take as much increased damage, that type of thing.
Interesting.
And then there's, like, the leader buff, which this one is what I was originally thinking of.
Okay.
This effect is given to the hero that is the target of the affinity.
Okay.
The more active party members that give the hero this effect, the effect changes. If one, both heroes get a 5% damage to all damage buff, meaning they just deal more damage. If two, all three heroes will gain 50% more mana per second, as well as a 7% damage buff. The leader can resist a locking effect if the locking effect isn't triggered by the leader. Basically meaning that on like Siegfried, Ascalon, and Galgoria, which can lock characters, the leader wouldn't be locked. However, I worded it in such a way that Heal can't stay unlocked even though he uses Soul Weapon. I thought of that.
Wow, that's crazy. But
if three or more, meaning 4 heroes are giving the leader buff, a 12% damage buff to all heroes will be given, while also being immune to locking effects unless self-inflicted. The leader also has skill cooldowns lowered by a second every 3 seconds, meaning that the leader gets CDR and all 4 of them are resistant to locking effects.
Wow, that's crazy. And that's just one of the effects that you listed over here, man.
I mean, that's also one of the better ones. The other one, which I think I might have overtuned, is Family, which if you want to read that one, you can. But that one's a rant.
That one is Dominic Toretto right there. Let's read this out for a second. The more active party members that give a hero this effect, and depending on the position, change the effect. If one, the affected hero or heroes each have their attack speed increased by 200, alright, and can cast their first, second, and third skill at the same time as their partner, regardless of. Wow! Okay, I can instantly see this is broken. Yo, that is crazy, my guy. That would be a lot of characters just popping skills for no reason. Well, it obviously is limited by the attack speed itself, but it's still way too broken. Wow.
But stop reading there because otherwise it is broken without the latter part.
Yep. Alright, okay. Cooldowns for heroes are increased by 50%. Okay, that kind of gives it the downside, but it is interesting for challenge rate, for instance, if you want to kill something super fast. So that's interesting.
And then CDR only gives half the values, basically meaning that it's harder to speed up mana loss. The CDR, but you have a really powerful CDR already.
Yup. And let's see more. If 2 or more, the same effects apply, but cooldowns are increased by 1,000. Okay. CDR can only. Okay. If by frontliner, damage given to other heroes, and basically what you're doing is the more characters that you get, the more CDR problems you will have, right? If I read this correctly.
The less CDR problem
problems
actually. And that's if they're directly related, hence getting the family buff. Meaning that family isn't going to be super common, but like arguably I could put this on the Hound unit or on Kazu, Frey, Klaus, and all of a sudden those 3 together are really, really strong.
Yep. That sounds great. And I think it also gives you options to really synergize for newer players, because think about it that we had walls previously, and having the right synergy with the right amount of characters will then break you through that wall without having unique weapons, unique treasures that you can invest into other characters. That way you can just go separate ways and still have yourself the options to clear certain things.
On top of this, it doesn't create a straight line anymore for initial progression.
Yep.
Like, if you're building, say, Theo, you're going to probably want to build Jane 100%, and then maybe even Ezekiel or something because of the fact that they're going to synergize really well.
Yep.
You won't have to go Fallen, Freya, Net, Rahartna in order to go through early content. You're going to have a better range of options that the buffs just might be a little more worth.
Yep. All right. I'm really digging this, man. I gotta cruise through this thing, dude. Wow. Let's read a lot.
And then Tame also mentioned something. Because you can target ban in PvP LOH, that makes it even more interesting, since then it changes what you might want to remove. It changes what you might want to ban. Yes, Rain might be the most annoying, but you might also be getting a different character that's giving a ridiculously stupid buff that you don't want to deal with.
Yep, and the fact that you don't know what people could potentially pick is adding to the issue at hand, which is just a very stale way of picking currently a League of Honor. So adding a complexity to it, that makes it more interesting. And then I think a lot of different kind of options will then make it more interesting. Obviously, there's always going to be a meta, but at the end of the day, it will allow for diversity, I think.
Mm-hmm. Like that's the word that I want to point out here. Diversity is what was one of the big things that pulled me into KR originally.
Yep.
With this idea, I'm trying to give KR more diversity. More reason to use it. Also, if we want to scroll down a little more, we can not just look at the positive, but the negative effects.
Oh, he got it.
Because just how there's good synergies with people,
families, not those
synergies. And so this will both be a good way to balance some of these ridiculous effects, while also not completely making them irrelevant.
And I think this also addresses another problem. I'm not sure if you thought about this, but this can be tweaked because it addresses not only one character but a multitude of them, which then is very easily buffed or nerfed.
Exactly.
And it is not susceptible to anybody having to invest into any type of characters, into any type of unique weapons, unique treasures, all the money that people spend, and this can simply be tweaked.
Because if you're building something specifically because of their effect, getting that effect tweaked isn't going to be a ridiculous thing, because that's also going to be something that carries through to other characters.
Exactly. And that could be something very, very crazy. I like that idea, because and that is something for another time. The fact that we're not gonna be nerfing, or the no nerfing policy that got through. Hopefully they will change that one day. But like I said, not gonna elaborate on it. But I don't like it whatsoever. But this seems to have so many options.
Tanahome actually has
Tamahome is my
like DLK and RC wouldn't synergize PvP anymore.
Yo, Tamahome, yo, just give yourself a fist bump like this. That is fire, my guy. Because this is good. People are gonna build their rebel clauses. People are gonna build their DLKs, but they're not supposed to be together, man. In terms of storyline, no, not ever.
And then I also have some like double effects and effects that directly tie into the character, because there is obviously some characters have self synergies.
Yep.
Because that exists. So like I'd like to point to double effects, which is the loner buff. The loner buff in particular.
Wait, where's that?
If there's an allies buff on the field, takes increased damage by 2.5% per allies stack on the field. If no allies buff is on the field, the loner gets a 3% damage buff and a 2.5% damage resistance buff that stacks once every 5 seconds. Yep. Stacks a maximum of 5 times. Essentially, that means that you would be able to build not just for connections, but also for a single character getting a certain effect.
Wow. I keep going back to this. I like this. I need some people in the chat, man. What do you think about this whole idea of adding something like an affinity chart in which you could simply, in my opinion, tweak back and forth on what is good and what is not. Some characters that could synergize, and in my opinion, give ourselves a lot more options than just the stale, oh, for robots you gotta build yourself Veronica and you gotta build yourself Priscilla. Until the next character gets buffed and you gotta build a whole nother one and you put one in the trash can. Now that to me sounds ridiculous, right? And an affinity chart, in my opinion, could really take away from those situations and just add something great. I like this. Oh, do you have another one that might be just crazy to let the people know?
I mean, if you want to, you can go ahead and show the Excel sheet, because this is a 10,000 blip Excel sheet that I need to fill out, or maybe it could turn into a community thing, I don't know.
Could
I
be.
just started listing things and seeing what connected. Oh, something I forgot to mention.
Uh-oh.
Some characters may just have never interacted with anyone. Like, for example, I don't think Bao ever interacted with Kazel. Therefore, those two wouldn't have any sort of synergies, period.
Yeah.
They would have no effects with each other.
True.
And
Oh,
Bao
with Lucius, baby!
Okay, this is now in the game, every character synergizes the same way, a different way with every character. You can still use Kazel and Leo together because nothing happens between them.
Yep. So there are people that will fall into the dark, some characters that won't work with each other, some people that will just be basically killing each other. So it has a lot of options on here. Crazy stuff. So I think we need to really close this one down and check what we have left to talk about, because we talked about at least our introduction, what made the game successful, and how we should really add more things. And I think complexity is what could keep this game into, I think, in a newer stage. I think complexity could add more, and I think an affinity chart or something down those lines could really bring back different kinds of gameplay where people are really free once again to invest into whatever characters they want. We talked a little bit about pay to win, and I don't like to elaborate more on that than what it is. We know people are wailing. We know companies rather have people that have big wallets play their games instead of having a broad audience at the end of the day. And where these new cash ups are going, I do not quite know. I don't think we need to elaborate on this any further. But then we have one last topic that I think we need to address, and that is the upcoming Dragons changes. What do you think is going to happen?
I'm very curious on how they're going to address this, if I'm being fair. Because there are two ways they can address it. Making it pertinent and making it the old gear meta again, which I think is the wrong way to do it.
Yep. And
then there's making some sort of item that contributes to helping the current gear without directly making it overpowered again, such as maybe a new shop or something like that. So or something else to spend our dragon dust on.
True. And didn't they say something along the lines like we're going to get a new dragon?
I think they said they were going to add a 5th dragon.
Nice. So what would you like that dragon to do? Kill everybody! No,
Well, let's just think of what we already have. We have Fire Dragon, which I don't even know what that gimmick was supposed to be. Ice Dragon, which is more or less an anti-magic. Poison Dragon, which was a DOT. And Black Dragon, which I'm pretty sure was AoE and lots of enemies. I think the main gimmick they could add is a dragon with a mana bar, or something similar.
Okay.
What mana bar I think would make it interesting. Because right now the only bosses we have which use the mana bar are Sieg and Shaq. While also being something that wouldn't necessarily have to rely on older things while still using the newer characters, which in this case I think is the right way to go because of the fact that people have the newer characters built. This is Dragons, it's something they should already have done. Well, quote-unquote done for endgame.
On the top of my head, I'd like to give a suggestion. You've played Summoner's War, right?
Yes.
And you had some co-op raids there as well, with a dragon, 3 heads, and you needed 3 parties over there.
I don't remember that. I didn't get that deep into Summoner's War, so I may or may not have ever gotten to it.
Okay, so basically what we used to have are Dragon Raids, which were co-op, right? Where you had to get your friends, your family, to really bring down some skills and rain hellfire upon them. Now, I'm not necessarily an advocate of co-op play because finding yourself a team might limit some of the people that really want to play by themselves. But in a sense, having multiple dragons where you got to kill them at the right time, where if you have 3 heads, for instance, and you can just hit the left head off, it will buff the other 2. So it might be better to kill them off at the same time. So you gotta just time your skills, this, that, and the third. That could really add to gameplay, and that could be a co-op mode, could be a solo mode. Co-op mode obviously being harder than the solo mode, such and such. So I think there are multiple ways, especially into Dragons, where I mean, you saw the race that people need to have friends. Oh my lord, man. Linkus is extremely right. Nobody in this day and age, man, everybody's living inside their mobile phone, man. They don't have any skin touches. Their mother never brushed their cheeks, man. No real kisses on their foreheads, no nothing, man. Everybody's angry permanently all the time. But yo,
yeah, imagine having a social life.
Oh, imagine. But I do feel that it would be interesting because we know James Raid's Discord, right? I just go there from time to time to just have a good time, to really just talk to the people and have fun, talk about the game on a non-veteran, well, maybe even a veteran level, but just to have fun, right? And I think a content like that could include it once again. And once again give us a little bit of a puzzle to then address and have a little bit of gameplay too. And the rewards itself, by all means, we're getting a lot of rewards. I don't think we need more of the same, but depending on if we need newer type of gear or an additional type of gear, it could really add to it. Whether Dragons will provide that, I'm not quite sure. But
I think sorry.
Yeah, just go on.
I think Dragons actually revamping it to be like a co-op focused content could actually be a good move.
True.
Asterisk here, if they make it so that they first entice people more into communities, they incentivize using chats, they show off the KR Discord, KR Encyclopedia, some more of their streamers, they give more access to connections, so that making it a more multi-focused content would be better.
Yep. And in a sense, wouldn't it be interesting, because this is what MMOs have a lot, and that is the ability to carry newbies, right? Like, let's say I want my little brother to play some King's Raid. Like, I know he's hell-bent on Summoner's War, this, that, and the third, and he would never play King's Raid because it would take too much investment at the end of the day to be at a level where I'm at. Where he just wants to enjoy the game for a little bit. Like, would Dragons be content to then allow me to carry him to a level where he could have fun without really having to struggle? Because that could be interesting.
I think it would be a good and a bad. It needs to have just enough leverage for people to need to focus on themselves, while also being spaced out just enough so that the whales can carry the free-to-plays and that type of thing.
Yep.
Like, as long as it requires the lobies to carry some sort of weight, it makes it so that they have to grow as well. while also the big boys can take some of the stress off. I think Arctim actually, unironically, does that sort of well. Because then we have the physical guy who takes the weight off the magic main, and the magic main who takes the weight off the physical main.
True.
Like, in that way, Arctim succeeded.
Yeah, I really do.
That's the only way Arctim succeeded.
Yep. Although, yeah, we both know what it kind of gave to. It wasn't content. It was just a small puzzle that you had to do, and now we have a limited ticket for every single week and a Ruby sync. That to me is Arctim. But like you said, it did succeed in one thing, and that is allowing people to play with each other if they have to.
Because one thing Arctim is useful for, besides giving a little more interaction, it is giving you a repositorium sync.
Yep. So, in the chat, let me know if dragons come out and we could give one item a potential farmable thing, and don't make it too broken, guys. What would be that one item that you wanted to farm from dragons that's currently already around?
I have an idea.
What's up?
They could do another shop.
Okay.
But they could use, especially some of the old art assets from the files, to make that shop not just buy it with gold or buy it with rubies, but buy it by trading in some of these other items, such as a poison heart or a poison eye, along with a blue dragon eye and 10,000 dragon coins.
Okay.
That way, farming them is a targeted way, so you can invest in buying something else, such as unique weapon fragments, more tickets, artifacts, fragments, ether, etc. Or even more friendship items, actually, because it probably would be in Jin's shop.
Yep.
Since he's the dragon guy. He's the dragon guy.
True.
But it would allow it to be something that people would have some sort of incentive to farm, without making it something that you have to farm.
Yeah, and I think it's already been addressed by some other people. Like, currently what really sets away, or like says the difference between veteran and newbie players is artifacts. What if you can farm different kind of artifacts by crafting them? Like, not with the usual like random tickets, but make it so that you can just literally craft it by, oh, X nails of that, X eyes of that. And the only thing that you can do then, and that's maybe the RNG part, is you can mix, let's say 100 items, and the amount of items will then give you a category of a set of artifacts. But it's still random. Then it still takes away from the real farmable part. It doesn't necessarily blow out the Tower of Challenge, but it allows you to then still sort of specifically farm the artifacts that you want.
I have a little bit of an idea.
Give me a second. Like, close the window.
Go ahead. Here's my idea. This would actually be pertaining to Dosarda a bit too.
Okay.
Basically, to revamp dragons, you farm it and you get eyes, hearts, and claws, the three things that they have files for and we've used in the past. The claws are the same things we would use to tier up from T6 to T7 and whatnot, but no one uses those anymore. You give Jin you give Jin just some of them in a certain quantity, and then depending on what you gave him, he gives you a random list of 8 artifacts, regular artifacts, not event artifacts, that you can buy for that week, one of each, and then 1 rare artifact if you gave him, say, hearts, a certain amount of them. The more you give him, the cheaper they become. Like, if you give him, say, just 1 heart, you might be able to get the nail ornament, but it costs 10,000 rubies, just an example. God, please don't do that. But if you give him 10 hearts, you might be able to buy it for 100 million gold. It lowers the tier of how much money you have to spend on it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll give you an incentivized to farm. There's still a somewhat RNG factor to it that people will not instantaneously get flooded by the things they want.
Exactly. It basically makes it so that you can't exclusively buy your nail ornaments all the time.
Yeah.
Or you can exclusively get an event artifact just by throwing some stuff in there. But you have a chance for it, and over time, getting these event artifacts will allow you to slowly build them up higher, and it plays off the fact that they're starting to do event artifact tickets.
True. And it still gives people like control over how they want their accounts to progress. Maybe PvE or PvP.
Like, similar to what GMT said, essentially this is an alternate way for you to get it's just an alternate way for you to get artifacts, but it doesn't invalidate Dosarda or anything like that.
True. I actually like that.
It's essentially just a little bit more of a sync, and it's a way you can prioritize artifact farming over TM gear or whatever. And then you can spend like 200 rubies or something to be able to like, give more materials to either lower the prices, or you can donate 1,000 rubies so you can throw a whole bunch more mats in there to get a whole new selection.
Yep.
Like, that would be a good way to balance it.
Yeah, and it gives people some incentive to then pay as well, because at the end of the day, Vespa wants to make money, and that allows it to crack. That is pretty interesting.
When you're crafting these ideas, you need to be able to think of it, how does this not make it only good for the player, but it makes it good for Vespa to do as well.
Yep.
If it has some sort of like Vespa incentive to it, they're more likely to consider your idea.
Yeah. So GMT, like, it sounds like Guardian Tales merchandise crafting. Well, to some degree, I think it makes it also easy to unlock things that are behind a pay-to-win wall, especially when it comes to flagged ordinary ornaments, whatever the hell they are. And this could also mean that they could sell them more easily. And I've come at a point as a veteran where I don't farm TM gear all that much, even though they're not maxed out, even though they're not all reclaimed, this, that, and the third. But to then have the option to have artifacts which can then be given to other characters, like if I want to fully invest into Eclipse, for instance, having myself a gazillion amount of these feathers would be crazy, right? So yeah, there are many things that they could add. See, and that's like I said, having yourself a option. Like, I would even address this to a point, like, how many UTs do we have? With each and their own sub-story, which is crazy, right? I haven't ever read all of them, but each and all of them have their own story to them. And having yourself to get certain ingredients to really make those instead will then allow people to get their UT farmed instead. And obviously the people who have more UT or more stamina will have more farms easier, this and a third, and people will then cap out easier. But with a combination of the affinity chart, then having a lot of other characters that can be cohesive with each other, or adhesive if anything, then there are so many more possibilities. But to speed that up, to speed up really the process of people getting to that end point, we need something that will incentivize that and will just add to that singular fact that we will add more complexity to the game without giving up the speed of progression. And I think that in a sense could really add to it.
Also, the thing that I think works the best with this idea is the fact that since there's still RNG, there's no way to truly plan for what you're getting.
True.
Like, you could get it that you need to farm rubies, you could get it that you just need to go farm the dragon more, you could get it that you need to go get some gold.
Yep.
You don't know what you need.
It's like a quest. You go over here, slay the dragon, and then you get items.
You go that way, and you go that way, and you go that way, and wait, why are you going up? Don't die!
It's just like that. So I do think they have a lot of options to do this without just having just another shop with just another way of giving people something, but have a rotating kind of maze shop that is solely based on your efforts. I think that's the best way to just summarize that.
Yep.
So, is there another thing that, in terms of gameplay, that we should have on New Dragons? Well, Yana's obviously gonna get a buff, so I'm quite curious whether she's gonna be the new Eclipse character for no reason.
Yep. I don't think she's going to become Eclipse. If she specializes in dragons isn't good anywhere else, as long as dragons are viable or are actually useful,
True.
I'm perfectly fine with her being only good there.
Mm-hmm.
It makes her, like, especially if, say, our ideal isn't active. That means that she would be a very good character to invest in if you want artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
But not if not.
True. Like, what would you like to see in a buff of her? Like, what would you like her to get? Like, do we give her the non-hero damage for no reason and let that be it?
No.
Or do we go for some completely different?
You give her skills more pertinence to what the dragons are. Give them boss damage. Give them a little less focus on AoE and more of a focus on drilling in on a certain target, like especially say her line attack, her straightforward attack.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, it can still be a straight on arrow AoE, but have like piercing damage. So like the first thing it hits that takes more damage, or the closer it is, the more damage they take.
Yeah, and I think it would be I'm not sure in what kind of games they already do this, especially not mobile phone games, but how about you have certain attacks, like you said, piercing, right? If you have multiple targets to hit on one dragon and you gotta kill one off earlier than the other, which means that you're not necessarily gonna press like, oh, I'm gonna attack the head, but if you could rotate the platforms, we talked about this before.
Do not get me started on circle theory right now,
Oh
please.
my. Okay, that's for another one, but having multiple targets on a single dragon to then make sure to make a raid easier depending on whatever he's gonna do at that time makes it so that it is not auto content.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be really interesting and easy to do as well. Dragons generally have 4 legs, a tail, 2 wings, and a big ass head. So there are how many targets? About 7 to 8, if not more. And obviously you can put anything on a dragon to make it look more dragon-like and have that give out another target. So in that aspect, they could add so much more gameplay to a single boss that you got to hit in different kinds of rotations, and at the same time make Bao more useful to have a character that will insta wipe your characters if you don't press that single button. Like there's so many things that could make some characters relevant.
I think Bao should get a minor buff where his cooldown for his S3 gets shortened to 20 seconds, but it's doubled for PvP. That way he has a little bit of PvE potency.
Fair.
Like, it doesn't have to be a lot, but it's just enough that, say, when you're playing with Evan, you can use Bao as a backup to make sure that the shield doesn't break, or that you cover the shield or something like that.
Yep.
Because Evan doesn't have 100% uptime without CDR.
Yep. Also things we could do. So I think we're already we're 1 hour and almost 30 minutes already in. I think we talked about things in depth, pretty sidetracked here and there, but I think we overall got it first. Pretty decent podcast in. I would like to wrap it up for today. Next time we're gonna add another person in there and have to talk about what the upcoming things are in King's Raid. Hopefully by then we will have a King's Raid 2 announcement, at least a date, maybe some content. 4 characters will be coming out, which I'm very curious as to what they are going to do. I know I'm going to save up, or at least try to, for one of the characters that will be out there. Karu, do you have any final things that you want to say for today?
How can I say something really stupid and get away with it? Okay,
Please don't get
I'm not gonna say anything.
demonetized.
Besides, only thing I will say is, get good.
I feel offended by that one, but anyways, as per usual, hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to see more of this kind of content, put down a comment down below. If you have a great idea, up top there is a way to address us. Make sure to do it if you have a good idea. We are popping it up here. I'm hoping Vespa will one day listen to this stuff, because I want to have Sean back in here. I don't know whether he got fired or not. I want to have PD Edge here so I can really talk to the dude on stream and ask him the real questions. And I do think a lot of people would be really interested in having a conversation with Vespa and get back that one thing that I think was core to what this game made successful. And that was a game and a company that listened to its players. With that, I'm signing out. Once again, hope you guys enjoyed. Drop a like, a comment, whatever. And I'll see you guys in the next one.